So how many of you Christians recognize this image right here? If you're Mormon, you probably do. This is what's known as New Jerusalem. It looks kind of funky, looks kind of weird. But yes, that is New Jerusalem. Again, if you're Mormon, you're probably more familiar with it than most Christians are. As in the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants and such, it has talked more about the millennial kingdom, millennial reign, or 1,000-year reign, than any other theology. And if you're Mormon, your books are, again, absolutely flooded with it. So what is New Jerusalem? What is the millennial kingdom? And the millennial kingdom, again, starts right here. And I, John, saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And to put it bluntly, this is actually my second time filming this, so I have no patience. But yeah, so essentially, New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God. So this is why in the model it depicts it as a floating city, just like that, or a floating cube, I guess, above that mountain. And here we go. I got my other quote for you. Right here, Micah, just to further explain what the millennial kingdom would have been. And it said, "It came to pass in the last days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be prepared on the top of the mountains, and high above the hills, and people shall flow to it. And many nations shall come in haste, and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God of Jacob, and he would teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth out of Sion, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. And he shall judge among the people, and rebuke strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into shades. Nation shall not take sword against nation, neither shall they learn a war any more. And every man shall sit under his vine and under his fig tree, and there shall be none to make them afraid. For the mouth of the Lord of hosts hath spoken. For all people will walk, everyone in the name of his God, and we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever." So this quote was actually insanely important for a couple reasons. This one being the most important right now. For all people will walk, everyone in the name of his God. So Christ is saying, again, I will reign. I will be the one that everyone knows is the ruler of everything for this time period, this 1,000 years. And he says, for all people will walk, everyone in the name of his God. So even when Christ visibly reigns, he will allow people to worship their own forms of thinking. But this also shows you how more nuanced people's views on religion as opposed to now. Because now people will say things along the lines of, out of all the options, which one's true, blah, blah, blah. But people back then didn't think of it like that. Just because there were more options didn't necessarily mean that one is true, one is not. That's not really how it works. You can reject an idea and know it still exists. The rejection of it doesn't always mean you're saying it doesn't exist. Which is pretty interesting, showing that people will be aware of Christ's doctrine and still manage to reject it. Now, this next one is the most important quote, in my opinion, in terms of what exactly is happening and what is the point of it. And it says, "And I saw an angel coming down," and it's worth noting that this is the Douay-Rheims Catholic translation, 1899. In Douay-Rheims, it says, it's normally called the Apocalypse, not Revelation, which is essentially the same thing, so it's really no different. I just really think it's important to notice how the text we're using. I'll get more into the differences in text later, but it says, "And I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand, and he laid hold on the dragon, the old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should no more seduce the nations, till the 1,000 years be finished, and after that he must be loosed a little time. And I saw seats, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them, and the souls of them that were beheaded for the testimony of Jesus, and for the word of God, and who had not adored the beast, nor his image, nor received his character on their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. The rest of the dead lived not till the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Essentially saying the first resurrection was when the saints, martyrs, all that stuff get resurrected. So anyone who died in the name of Christ gets resurrected. Less than holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. In these the second death has no power. But they shall be priests of God, and Christ shall reign with him 1,000 years. That's important because under this premise, let's say, well, my assertion, to be honest, most people will know from the title of this video, my assertion is that the 1,000-year with Christ has already happened. As to why and how, I'll get into more later. But essentially, this quote is important because it explains why the Catholic Church, or not just the Catholic Church, but the Orthodox Church, are valid in their veneration of saints, as if this had already happened, the saints would have been resurrected, would have been appointed as priests of God in Christ, and did reign with him 1,000 years. They were kings and queens, as Mary is the queen of heaven. She presumably was the queen down here, which is why people still revere these people and still worship them. But Protestants say worship, but Catholics and Orthodox, they know the difference between veneration and adoration. It says, when the 1,000 years shall be finished, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, shall go forth and seduce the nations, which are over the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, and shall gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they came upon the breadth of the earth, and encompassed the camp of the saints, the beloved city. And this is again important, because we're establishing here that Christ reigns for 1,000 years. He is sitting here for 1,000 years with his saints and martyrs at his side. But eventually Satan's goal is to get everybody to, here we go, march across the breadth of the earth and encompass the camp of the saints. So how does a 1,000-year kingdom become one camp? So presumably there was a downsize, and not just saints just up and left, people just up and left. Progressively and slowly this place started to fade more away. It says, and there came down fire from God out of heaven, and devoured them, and the devil who seduced them, and was cast into the pool of fire and brimstone, where both the beast and false prophet shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. I saw a great white throne, and one sitting upon it, from whose face the earth and heaven fled away, and there was no place found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing in the presence of the throne, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged by those things which were written in the books according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and hell gave up their dead that were in them, and were judged everyone according to their works. And hell and death were cast into the pool of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the pool of fire. This, I'll let you, for now, I'm not going to get into this. I'll let you take away whatever you want from it. The reason being is this is super complicated, because like nowadays when people pass, people always say, oh, they go to heaven. Nobody really goes to heaven, ever. There's no person ever enters heaven. That's just not a possible thing. That's not based in theology. That's based in random fan fiction. Essentially, everybody is waiting for that one judgment. Once that one judgment ends, we all go to a new earth. That doesn't say in this quote right here, but essentially what we're all waiting for is new earth, not heaven. Nobody goes to heaven. Oh. Yawning is starting to make me angry. But this quote is probably one of my most favorite, just because the symbolism in it is so nuanced. It's so nuts. So let's break it down. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid. The calf and the lion and the sheep shall abide together, and the little child shall lead them. Super nuanced again. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb. So essentially, anybody who is normally at odds, normally opposes each other in any capacity, these guys will be able to live together, coexist together, without a society that facilitates them arguing, without a society that, again, just facilitates conflict between dual groups of people. That doesn't occur at all. People just coexist regardless of whether kind of thing you believe. And the leper shall lie down with the kid. So leopard lying down with the kid, again, pretty cool. I like this one because the leopards are, they're stealthily and they're predatory and, they're super fast. The cats, and they lie down with the kid. The kids are stupid and they're prey. So this, like, not even trying to be mean, like, this is true because it's like, essentially say we don't have to be afraid of predatory nature. Not that these rules don't exist in their most basic form, like not that leopards and kids don't exist, like predators and people don't exist, but there's no fear of things of that nature. The calf and the lion and the sheep shall abide together. And this is pretty cool as well because you think it's the same as these, like, oh yeah, they're just living together, chilling, having fun. But the calf and the lion and the sheep shall abide together. It's a little bit more nuanced than that because not only does it reinforce these points, but it's also showing us that it's a group thing. There's different diverse groups of individuals and they all are together. Not only that, but a little child shall lead them. So these groups, no matter how different they are in ideology, in look, in practice, they are led by innocence. And the calf and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall rest together. The calf and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall rest together. This one's interesting because the calf and the bear are feeding and their young ones are resting together. So not only does this reinforce these points, be like, okay, these guys are all chilling, eating together, vibing out, but their young ones shall rest together. So presumably throughout the full 1,000-year totality, you can expect generations to be doing the same thing. These generations are doing the same thing as these ones are, and presumably their kids are doing the same thing. So this goes for the full totality of the 1,000 years. And the lion shall eat straw like the ox. This shows us again that you don't need to have a predatory nature. You don't need to be hunting for your nourishment, for your sustenance. It's essentially we're all just vibing out. And the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp. Not that the hole of the asp or the viper doesn't exist, but it's not something that, again, you have to be afraid of. Not that it isn't in the ground. And this is pretty nuanced because it's the hole of the asp. So when it comes to like things being underground, pretty symbolic in terms of the Millennial Kingdom, either literally and metaphorically. And the weaned child shall thrust his hand into the den of the basilisk. See, this is pretty cool. A lot of people will read this and be like, oh, you know what? This first point is redundant. This is essentially the same thing. But that's not true. Basilisks in folklore and mythology are essentially hybrid creatures. And a lot of them turn you to stone when they look at you. Basilisk. But if you look at this right here, this one, if you go to the KJV, it says the cockatrice den. Same in practice, cockatrice, same thing as the basilisk. Except like literally bar for bar, same thing as the basilisk. It says it's got a rooster head. It's just, it's like okay, so someone's lying. Like if they're two things that are like the same properties, like someone was like, you know what, rooster head. I don't really know. It's pretty cool. I lost my thing. Hold on. Whatever. And this next one, hole in the ass in the den of the basilisk. So it's a hybrid creature. New or as you get more and more modern, you'll realize that it stops it from the whole hybrid nature and it starts making it more of just snake, viper, whatever. But it was they almost in the older translations it was a point that this was the hybrid folklore animal being whatever. Reason being is if you go pre-flood, the children of the Watchers or the Nephilim, the demons in their most physical form, were not only hybrids in the sense that they were hybrids of human and angels, but they also became hybrids prior or post-flood, being genetic mutations and such of that nature. So, and it's not like these guys didn't exist. They were almost dormant. Like they were not permitted to do anything to harm anybody. They shall not hurt, nor shall they kill on my holy mountain, for the earth is filled with the knowledge of the Lord, as the covering waters of the sea. So if everybody knew, again, as the covering waters of the sea, like pick anything to know. And if you could describe this statement as everybody knows this, it's as the covering waters of the sea, everybody knows this. This is not new knowledge. This is not something that, you know what I mean? So it gives you an example of what reality was like back then. And I'll get into that in a second. So now that I've shown you what this type of environment looked like, again, my assertion is that this thing already happened. And if you want to start where I perceive this might have happened, you can go to Pope Sixtus III. And first, look at this guy's face. Like, he just looks like a criminal. He just looks like a terrible dude. He does not look like a nice guy. And his name happens to just be 666. Like, what is going on? That just happens to be his name. And if you know anything about popes, you'll know each pope, they'll adopt names from people, but they're usually not named that actual thing. They usually just adopt the name. Except this guy. The two preceding Pope Sixtuses were not named Pope Sixtus. They adopted that name. This guy, his actual name was 666, Pope Sixtus III. This guy was so weird. And what he did, he existed, he died 440. He was born 31st July 432. 996. Sorry, I was looking at his numbers. If you look at the numbers you have here, I want to show you something. Maybe it's nothing. But if you go to 31st of July, July is our 6th month, I believe. January, February, March, April, May. January, February, March, April, May, June, July. Okay, the reason I have to do that is weird. It's just because I'll show you in a second. But if you look at that, that's our normal calendar. But if you go to this is the original Latin calendar. This would explain why our months look stupid. In the sense that September, for example, is the sept means 7, the prefix sept means 7, but that's our 9th month. Oct means 8, but that's our 10th month. You know, it's weird. They start with March. March, beginning of all that, is the first of our year. December is our 10th month, DEC. But you'll notice January and February were a later addition, and they were put almost added to the end, but then put to the front, which is why it's like still technically March is the beginning, but we just said no, it's January and February now. I don't know why, and I don't know how. It's a little confusing, even for me sometimes. But so this would actually be the 4th month. So 31st 432, and then he died 18/6, which would be our 8th. August is our 8th month, but this would be their 6th month. 996440. Just a bunch of 3s, 4s, 6s, 9s, 0s. Could be nothing, could be coincidental. But then, again, this guy was born 432, died 440. So this is essentially what I'm saying here. When you look at the Middle Ages, they'll teach us that Middle Ages, Dark Ages, started with the fall of Rome, ends with the beginning of the Renaissance. Starts at about 500 AD, ends about 1500. So it's a 1,000-year period. 1,000-year period where all our amazing architecture comes from, but too bad it was a 1,000-year period where stupid Christians were in the world. Nothing happened ever because Christians are dumb. That's pretty much what they tell us about this society or this time period in history. And essentially, I don't think that happened. I don't think that was the case. I think this was time period where Christ reigned on earth, where the things that I was describing actually occurred. And you'll notice after Pope Sixtus, there was the worst period in human history where 536 AD, volcanic eruption that slightly reducing sunlight caused a sharp drop in temperatures. I'm pretty sure this sunlight stopped for like 18 months or something. We might see more about it. A reduced sunlight cooler changes led to widespread crop failures, famine across regions, beginning in 541, the plague of Justinian. Yeah, worst year to be alive, and 536. I'm thinking, the Millennial Kingdom started around that period, but it's also possible our years have been, distorted, stretched, pulled, just a little bit confused upon. But if you look at Pope Sixtus IV, Pope Sixtus IV didn't show up until 1,000 years after Pope Pope Sixtus III shows up. This guy didn't show up for another 1,000 years. But when he showed up, not only was he, not only did he create the Spanish Inquisition, so he was walking around killing heretics, murdering them, murdering people he deemed to be heretics. And he was noted for his nepotism, personally involved in the famous Pazzi conspiracy. And again, you'll remove the Medici family from the power of Florence. You'll notice around this time, 1,000 years after the the fall of Rome, or what I perceive to be the end of the Millennial Kingdom, everywhere around the world is starting to usher in dynasties. China's doing it. All over Europe, there's these wars between families. There's just a ton of things going on where dynasties are being put in place. And it's the re-ushering of families. This is what I believe to be the Nephilim bloodline. This, if I'm honest, plays all the way to now, even with what people perceive to be other threats of like World War III and stuff. Everything with Russia, Iran, or Iran, I should say, Israel, Ukraine, did I say Russia? Whatever. America, everything we think about World War III, all that stuff realistically has to do with bloodline. And they don't really want us to know anything about that, but it all is still about the bloodline. Everything, from this point all the way up to now. Any major disaster, anything has always been about bloodline. Always. And this guy, he also created the Vatican Library. Again, being what I believe to be the very end of the Millennial Kingdom, he starts the Vatican Library, erasing families from existence, killing Christians he deems as heretics. That's what this guy was doing. Not only that, but remember the Latin months I was talking about? This, and not only that, but I was talking about Mormonism, and I'll go more into Mormonism in another video, but I really just want to explain just the Millennial Kingdom down to right to the end of Mormonism, just to make things a little bit more clear so that my further videos will have something to build upon. But if you look at this guy's numbers, 21, so this guy was born 21 July 1414, 21, 7 plus 7 plus 7, and then July, the 4th month, right? And then this is 1414, so 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7, right? And I'm saying 4 because that's the original Latin calendar again, but then 12. And again, this would be 8, but on our month, on the Latin month, it's 6. So it's 666, 12 plus 6, so 666, and 1484. But I was figuring something out in my research for this video, because again, I'm trying to tie it to Mormonism, and I looked at that year, and a quote from the Bible popped in my head, where Jesus says that there is nothing new under the sun. So I thought, I wonder if Satan reuses these numbers. And instead of 1484, I plugged in 1844, and I already knew this from the back of my mind. If you already asked me the question, like when this happened, this is what I'd say, 1844. But I completely forgot for some reason, and I plugged it in, and I realized this is the year Joseph Smith died. The exact year. Like, isn't that nuts? Isn't that crazy? Let's see, like, what's the coincidence? What is the absolute coincidence? There's none. There's no coincidence. And I found out that there is no such thing. They don't exist. Just being honest. And the only reason I'm saying it like that because this is my second time recording. My first recording, trust me, was much more full of life, much more energetic. But this is the second time around, just trying to get it done. But yeah, and you look at what was going on down there, and essentially, I think it's important to look at things like where are we at? This, and when you think about things like Freemasonry claims more ancient roots than we have documentation for. Their known first appearance was around not too long after this period, or around this period, again, after the Millennial Kingdom, but they claim more ancient roots than that. But any more ancient than where they are would put them prior to the Millennial Kingdom. So that would make sense to me why we call them secret societies, but we all know about them. We know about the Illuminati, Freemasonry, Skull and Bones, even though Skull and Bones happened later. We know about all these guys because they're not secret anymore. They probably were once secret under the Millennial Reign, the Millennial Kingdom. They were waiting to emerge once everything stepped off. And presumably these guys were, again, dwelling underground. But again, they're ancient. They don't claim that history, but they claim that they have more ancient roots. So if you're sitting there and you're questioning them, you're like, yeah, but you can't prove that. They're like, yep, we know that. And it's like, you know what I mean? But essentially, when you get to these guys, how does this all connect to Mormonism? Well, eventually, if we can prove that the Catholic Church was slightly corrupted, or corrupted in terms of its papacy with the dynasty, this would, in my opinion, make the Orthodox Church the last remaining remnant of the Millennial Kingdom. I was previously Catholic, but I now actually, under this research, converted to Orthodox. Or I don't really like to say converted. I just truly believe that they might be the last living remnant. I don't know if Orthodox would naturally consider me an Orthodox, maybe still consider me a Catholic. Maybe even Catholics wouldn't even consider me a Catholic. I don't really care. But when you go into how this comes to Martin Luther, this guy, this loser, and I got nothing nice to say about this guy, because what's going on is whether he was willing or unwilling participant of this whole thing, obviously the Catholic Church was being deliberately, infiltrated. And this guy comes around and says, hey guys, they're doing indulgences. Clearly Jesus was an adulterer with Mary Magdalene. How does that make any sense? So we've established that the Catholic Church was corrupted due to people and their choices, or perhaps literally Satan. So this guy's saying, guys, clearly the Catholic Church corrupt. Let's change the theology and believe whatever version of Christianity we want. How does that make any sense? How, if somebody misrepresents an idea, like if I'm a Trump supporter and Trump goes and says, whatever, am I suddenly not a conservative anymore? Or that goes the same thing if I voted, people who like Obama, if Obama goes and says something, are you not a Democrat anymore? Clearly this guy was going around, whether he knew it or not, he was involved in the degradation of Christian theology, or the understanding of Christian theology. And this allowed for people like Joseph Smith to come around and do the exact same thing, but redirect it. I think we're not looking at a series of accidental events that led to a degradation of understanding. Essentially, we're looking at a series of steps. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, and Step 4. As to which step we're on, I'm not too sure. But what does that actually have to do with this cube right here? This little cube. So this cube, why I believe this is what New Jerusalem looks like. It's depicted as being 1,500 cubits wide, tall, and long. So that's a cube, right? That's a cube. If you say something is the same size, exactly the same length as it is wide and tall, I'll be like, that's a cube, buddy. And essentially, where does this thing appear? Like I said, it's prior to and post-millennial kingdom. So, in terms of how this thing operates, it's a floating city, right? And why I believe it to be floating is actually this right here. A lot of people aren't familiar with it, and a lot of my post-millennial kingdom people aren't familiar with it, because not too many people are familiar with these guys, even if they're familiar with like superheroes, just because not too many guys even, at least nowadays, because they're just movie watchers. But Jack Kirby, who's the creator of these guys, he helped create Galactus and Silver Surfer and such. Galactus was actually meant to represent the Old Testament God. Silver Surfer meant to represent Lucifer. Jack Kirby actually was possessed by demons when he was a little kid, by his own admission. and rabbis came and exorcised him and such. Oh, my bad, I forgot to switch that. But this right here, New Genesis, my bad. And demons came in, rabbis came and exorcised him and such, and essentially he came up with ideas like these, new gods, and because there were old gods and these are the new gods, and he actually ended up working for DC and created eventually the same thing with Darkseid and the High Father and such. But this guy ended up coming up with ideas like Thor, Spider-Man, Thor being Marduk and Sumerian, Spider-Man just being hybrid creature, hybrid experimentation, Hulk being a hybrid Nephilim. These guys are almost bar for bar demon depictions and depictions of, you know, demons in old history. It's just repackaged, reinvented, just as they've been doing throughout history for thousands and thousands of years. But demons are pretty complex, and the interpretation of demons is pretty complex, because not only are these guys pretty self-absorbed, but they're also just not as cool as you really would like them to be or think them to be. They're kind of lame. This guy actually does a pretty good job of going over them. This is the Nephilim clown thing. He does a lot of post-millennial kingdom stuff, but this Nephilim clown stuff is probably some of the most in-depth analysis of Nephilim I've ever seen in my entire life. Pretty nuts. But I also want to show you things like this. Cube. This is the Islamic cube in Mecca. More on this in another video. But this is very interesting as it pertains to the New Jerusalem cube. And there's also another thing as it pertains to bloodlines. It all starts with this guy, King John. King John of the Magna Carta. He was around in 1200, mid to early 1200. Again, either while the Millennial Kingdom is receding, or I believe it might be right prior to its end. Within 100 years, 150 years prior to its end. Maybe even 200. Not too sure. But within the 200 range of time. Within the 200 range of time before the Millennial Kingdom officially ends. And you'll notice our politicians and celebrities are all born under this guy. Essentially, I think this guy might be a symbolic contract holder, bloodline contract holder. Anybody who is under his bloodline must be under, what is it? Under contract to the authority. More specifically, I'll make another video about that later. But then you get, everything is all about bloodline. And you even have this guy later on, super important guy. I can't wait to get into my bloodline stuff. I'm trying not to because it's hurting my head. It hurts my head to even think about it. But especially when you get to cubes, this is the Holy of Holies and the Ark of Covenant, meant to represent the Chamber of God or New Jerusalem. And then you get to sapphire stones. This is what a lot of the Jews believe the Ten Commandments might have looked like. Just stones like this made of sapphire. Yeah. That's pretty much what those look like. I think those might have been the ones that he smashed. I'm not too sure. But it shows you how much there is to really understand about these things. Like cubes, like the Lord uses cubes. He's just sitting here and put cubes and everything. I think his version of a cube is much more complex than our version of a cube. And I think that's why sorry, it's just so weird to put it like that, just cubes. But I think that's partly why the Islamics, you know, sit here and weep and cry over these cubes. They're like, blah, blah, blah. They're like sitting here doing it. This is like our human cube. It's different from God's cube in purpose, structure, and composition. Is the best way for me to put it. And you'll find similar things of that nature throughout on Earth. Things that are different from things that God says. God will say one thing exists, and there's a counterfeit version of that that's different in purpose, nature, and composition. Yeah, purpose, nature, composition. That's really what they're different in. Like Black Sun theology. Black Sun theology is mainly Hitler's thing. America kind of took over his Black Sun research after World War II. But Black Sun research is essentially what... it actually ties to this real quick. It actually ties to the New Jerusalem, because if you look at this, this is actually the Freemason symbol. This is where they believe goes like this. This is the symbol they have. They have Polaris, and it goes like this. I don't know if you've ever seen that, because normally it's like a protractor. They have a protractor like that, but it's almost meant to obfuscate the thing that they're really looking at. They're looking at these things right here. And when these things fully line up, that's what Freemasons really are about, is this black sun theology. And you'll notice that. But essentially, now that we know that New Jerusalem is a floating city up in the sky, I want to take you to Rupus Nigra. Rupus Nigra to Siberia. So this is the Rupus Nigra. This is the flat Earth map, by the way, but whatever. I don't know. This is right in the middle, and this is not depicted as a a snowy, desolate area. This is a lush, tropical paradise island. Not at all what we think it is. What we say Santa lives. Santa, this fat mythological guy who just has his elves build kids stupid trinkets using his magical abilities. Almost a mockery of Christ, who is this Father living in this Creator living in, or Jesus in his physical form lives down there, living in there in this lush, warm environment, but with his saints and martyrs. But they tell us Santa in these fantasy stories with his magical elves live there who just do nothing but give kids presents. All this stuff, I actually have something to show you as well. When you go into the Den of the Basilisk, things like that, you'll notice King James actually, not King John, not King John, not him, but King James, he actually wrote the book on demonology, and one of his quotes in demonology is essentially saying, now that this is a problem, when he, something along those lines, he writes in the book, I can't pull up the exact quote, you can read that book for yourself, but he's talking about how now that these demons are, an issue, we must really know about them. Because, remember, you could put your hand in the Den of the Basilisk and nothing would happen because these guys were, dormant. But right after the Millennial Kingdom, King John's like, hey, these guys are a problem. We better write a book about these guys. So he wrote the book about demonology because we are supposed to really know our enemy. As for what King James really thought and believed, where his allegiance really was, not too sure. I still need to do more research on King James. Not too sure what was going on. I do know he had the original Apocrypha in his text, and it was later taken out because of Protestants. But when you go back to Rupus Nigra, this island right here is almost misleading in a sense, because Rupus Nigra to Siberia, this is actually heading to Siberia. It says approximately 33 French miles in circumference. What a coincidence! 33 miles, 33 years of Christ, and this island is 33 miles in circumference. I must be nuts. But yeah, this island is like shooting towards Siberia. It's going like 30 miles per hour or so, or per year, not per hour, per year. This island is zooming. And it's heading towards Siberia, but it's also an erratic speed because God only knows the hour and the day. But it's essentially saying, again, this island is going to be here in a couple decades. This is not going to... I'm trying to look for where... I saw Phantom Island, blah, 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 Micah Bypass. Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. It's described as a black rock. But this is going to be here in a couple decades. Based on how fast it's going, again, we don't really have too much time as to how long. And the reason I'm confused looking at this image, because I've looked up this premise, Rupus Nigra to Siberia, a million times. And every time I look it up, this AI overview gives me less and less the information that I want to get. I don't know why. It'll be like, give me something specific, and I'll look for that specific thing every time, and I just can't find it. I cannot find it at all. Yeah, but it's not telling me... it used to tell me that we have a couple decades, but it's not saying that here. But essentially, this island is floating over there. And when you think about what was happening in 2017, when Donald Trump did his Space Force, he launched a bunch of drones up into the sky. It's my opinion that these drones are meant to obfuscate the Rupus Niagara as it comes closer and closer, and to allow them to essentially, just like in Spider-Man Far From Home with what Mysterio was doing, our government's going to be doing that with the New Jerusalem. They can make it look like whatever they want. They can make it look like it's not there. They can make it look like something else. They can make their own version of it. They can make it look like something that people are supposed to attack, like an alien mothership of some sort. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And especially, when they came out with, I'm not even going to get into the elections and all that. I don't believe the last Joe Biden was the same person. I think that was a tactic our government did. And you'll notice throughout ancient history, when governments would put out fake people, it's essentially a mockery of the system, saying like, it's almost over, served its purpose, we're done. And there's more on that later. I'll make a separate video about that. But this might be it for now in terms of my world building. I'm going to get more into the bloodlines and the more specifics later. I just really wanted to get this Millennial Kingdom idea out there, and not only that, the fact that the bloodlines exist, the fact that they do still control and are in position of power today. This image is still one of my favorite images of all time, even though it was created by AI. I really like it, really cool. But yeah, I guess with that being said, all glory be to the Father, to the Son, to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.